Ask most people what is outside the universe, and they will tell you the question makes no sense. The universe is all there is, they will say, so there is no outside, the way there is no north of the North Pole. But that confident little answer hides something strange. When you take the question to the people who have thought about it the hardest, the cosmologists and the philosophers, they do not fall silent. They hand you answer after answer, each one stranger than the one before. More universes bubbling out of an endlessly inflating foam, membranes drifting a hair's breadth away in a direction your body cannot point toward. A civilization outside of time that already knows exactly how our story ends. An ocean of true nothing that unmakes whatever dares to touch it. And every one of these answers, followed to its end, quietly dissolves the very idea of an outside as a place you could stand. So which is it? Is the question empty, or is it the largest one a human being can ask? Settle in. Hit subscribe if this is your first time here, because by the end of tonight, you will never look at the edge of the sky the same way again. Now, let's slowly ease into this. Part 1. The Infinite Bubble Bath. There is a question you probably asked as a child, and then were quietly taught to stop asking, because the adults around you did not have an answer, and it made them uncomfortable to admit it. The question is this: if the universe is everything there is, then what is outside it? Tonight we're going to take that question seriously, more seriously than anyone told you it could be taken, and we're going to walk through the 10 most serious answers that scientists and philosophers have actually proposed. We will begin at number 10 with the gentlest of them, the one that stays closest to ordinary physics. And even this gentle one, if you follow it all the way to the end, will leave you sitting very still in the dark. Let me start by clearing away a misunderstanding, because almost everyone carries it. When you imagine the edge of the universe, you probably picture a kind of wall, and on the far side of the wall more space, empty and black, going on forever. But that picture already contradicts itself. If there is more space on the other side, then the wall was not the edge of the universe at all, because space is part of the universe. The honest version of the question is stranger and harder. It is not asking what is in the room next door. It is asking what is outside the entire building, when the building is defined as all the rooms that could ever exist. Hold that difficulty in your mind, because every theory we meet tonight is really a different attempt to answer it without cheating. The first attempt begins with a man named Alan Guth, and a very good year for cosmology, around 1980. Guth was trying to solve several stubborn problems in the standard story of the Big Bang at once, and he found that he could solve all of them with a single bold idea. He proposed that in the very first sliver of a second after the beginning, far less than a billionth of a second, space did not expand gently. It expanded explosively, doubling in size and then doubling again and again, an unthinkable number of times, so that a patch smaller than a single particle was stretched larger than everything we can now see. This idea is called cosmic inflation, and the remarkable thing about it is that it works. It quietly explains why the universe looks so smooth and so flat, and its fingerprints appear to be written across the oldest light in the sky. Inflation is not fringe. It sits close to the center of modern cosmology. But the theory did not stay tame for long, and the person who followed it to its unsettling conclusion was a physicist named Andrei Linde, working alongside others like Alexander Vilenkin. Linde asked a simple question. Once this violent doubling of space begins, does it ever actually stop? And the mathematics gave back an answer that nobody had ordered. In most versions of inflation, the process does not stop everywhere. It stops in some regions, which cool and settle into calm ordinary universes like the one you're sitting in. But in the spaces between, inflation keeps going, still doubling, still stretching, feeding on itself. And within that still inflating background, new calm regions are constantly bubbling out, each one becoming its own self-contained universe. This is called eternal inflation, and it means that the beginning was not a single event. It is a process that never ended, happening still, out beyond the edge of everything we can see. Picture what that actually implies, because this is the answer to our question. What is outside our universe? In this theory, outside our universe is more universes, an endless foam of them. Imagine an ocean of bubbles. except the ocean is inflating so fast that the bubbles are flung apart faster than light can travel between them, and each bubble is not a pocket of air but an entire cosmos, with its own galaxies, its own history, and possibly its own laws of physics, its own strengths of gravity, its own kinds of particles. Our universe is one bubble in that foam, not the centre of it, not special within it, just one among a number that has no end. And the walls between the bubbles are not made of anything you could push through. They are made of space itself, expanding so quickly that no ship, no signal, no ray of light will ever cross from one bubble to the next. Whatever is out there is sealed away from us forever, not by distance exactly, but by the growth of distance. I want you to stand at the edge of your own bubble for a moment, in your imagination, and look outward. You cannot really do this, because the edge is not a place you could fly to, but let the mind try anyway. You are at the outer boundary of everything you have ever known, and beyond it the background is still inflating, an immensity of stretching space with no features and no end. And as you watch, somewhere out in that brightness, a new calm region settles and pinches off, a fresh universe being born, quietly, without ceremony. For one instant you can almost see it, and then the space between you and it swells so violently that it is torn away, its light red shifting into nothing, gone before it ever really arrived, a whole cosmos that budded into being right beside you, and that you are already, permanently, cut off from. It will live its entire history, billions of years of it, and you will never receive a single photon from it. That is what the boundary of our universe looks like in this theory. Not a wall with something behind it, but a birthplace of worlds you can never reach. Now here is where the gentle theory stops being gentle, and I want to go slowly, because this is the part that tends to sit with people at 3 a.m. The word that does the damage is not a big word. It is the word infinite. If eternal inflation is right, and the foam of bubbles truly has no end, then every arrangement of matter that is physically possible must occur somewhere out there. Not might occur, must. Because in an endless collection, anything with a real chance of happening happens, and happens without limit. Somewhere in that foam is a universe almost exactly like this one, identical down to the room you're in, except that one small choice in your life went the other way. Somewhere is another where a different choice went the other way. Somewhere humanity never evolved at all. Somewhere the laws of physics are so alien that nothing you would recognize as matter can hold together. Every version of every possibility, playing out endlessly, in bubbles drifting through inflating dark. Sit with what that means about you, specifically, because it is not an abstraction. It means you are not singular. If the foam is truly infinite, there is not one of you. There are unlimited copies, and near copies, and slight variations, an entire population of almost yous, each one certain that they are the only one, each one sealed inside their own bubble exactly as you are sealed inside this one. Every road you did not take, someone with your face is taking it right now, and you will never meet them, never see them, never send them so much as a word, because the space between you is expanding faster than any message could ever cross. You are one instance of yourself, walled off from all the others by an ever-widening emptiness. And the mathematics that says so is the same mathematics that so beautifully explained the smoothness of the sky. You do not get to keep the parts of the theory you like and discard the part that frightens you. They come together, or not at all. I should be honest with you about how much weight this idea can bear, because intellectual honesty is the whole point of a night like this. Inflation itself is taken very seriously and supported by real observations. Eternal inflation is a natural consequence of many versions of it, and most cosmologists regard it as plausible, even likely. But the leap to a genuine infinity of bubbles, each with different laws, cannot be checked. By its own logic, the other bubbles are unreachable, which means no telescope will ever confirm them. There are even subtle technical troubles hiding inside the idea. When you try to ask how likely a universe like ours is within the foam, the mathematics stops giving sensible answers, because counting things in an infinite set turns out to be treacherous. Physicists call this the measure problem, and it is genuinely unsolved. So I am not telling you this is true. I am telling you it is where our best theory of the early universe seems to point when you refuse to look away, and that it is only number 10. There is one more layer to this that I do not want to skip, because it is where the idea connects to our actual best attempts at a final theory of physics. When physicists study string theory, the framework many hope will someday unite all the forces of nature, they find that it does not pick out a single set of physical laws. It allows for a staggering number of possible sets, different strengths for the forces, different masses for the particles, an estimate often quoted as something like 1 followed by 500 zeros of distinct possibilities. Physicists call this immense range of options the possibility space. On its own, that is just a lot of unrealized possibilities on paper. But bring it together with eternal inflation, and something clicks into place. Each bubble that forms in the endless foam could settle into a different point in that possibility space, a different set of laws, so that the multitude of possible physics is not merely theoretical, but actually realized, one set per bubble, spread across the infinite foam. Our particular laws, the ones that allowed atoms and stars and you, would then be not a cosmic mystery but a local accident, the settings that happen to hold in our bubble, and nowhere near all of them. And that reframes the most fundamental question we usually ask about the universe, the question of why the constants of nature are so precisely suited to life. On its own, that fine-tuning looks almost miraculous, as if someone had dialed the settings with us in mind. But if there are unlimited bubbles with every possible set of laws, then the tuning is no miracle at all. Almost all the bubbles are dead, hostile, incapable of forming anything as complicated as a molecule. We simply find ourselves in one of the rare ones that works, because we could not have arisen anywhere else. It is the same reason you find yourself on a planet with breathable air, rather than in the empty spaces between stars, not because the universe cares about you, but because you could only ever have appeared in the one place that permits you. The bubbles that could not hold life hold no one to wonder why they are empty. Comforting or chilling, the logic is hard to escape once you accept the foam. So let us hold the shape of this first answer before we climb down to the next. What is outside the universe? More universes, endlessly, sealed off by walls of growing space, containing every version of everything, including you. It is a strange thought, but notice that it is still a comfortable kind of strange, because at least the outside is made of the same stuff we know: space, time, matter. More of it than we can bear to imagine, but recognizably the same sort of thing. The theories only get less comfortable from here, because the next one does not fill the outside with more universes like ours. It fills it with parents. It asks where our universe actually came from, and it finds the answer in the last place you would ever think to look for a birth. It finds it in the darkest, most destructive objects our cosmos contains. Keep the bubbles in mind, and come with me to number 9. Part 2. The Mother Universe. The universe contains objects so destructive that everything about them says ending. A black hole is where matter is crushed out of existence, where light itself cannot climb back out, where the ordinary rules of space and time appear to break down and stop. It is the last place any reasonable person would go looking for a beginning. And yet the 9th theory on our list proposes exactly that. It suggests that the outside of our universe is not a foam of bubbles but a family tree, and that we are somewhere in the middle of it, and that the wombs in which universes are conceived are the very things we think of as graves. The physicist behind this idea is Lee Smolin, and he introduced it in the early 1990s, developing it through that decade into a full proposal he called cosmological natural selection. The name is deliberate. Smolin looked at biology, at the way living things reproduce with small variations and are selected over generations for whatever helps them reproduce, and he asked a daring question. What if universes do the same thing? What if the cosmos is not a single object but a lineage, evolving over unimaginable stretches of time, shaped by the same logic that shaped every creature on Earth? It sounds like poetry, but Smolin built it as physics, and the mechanism he proposed is precise. Here is how it works. When a large star dies and collapses into a black hole, matter falls inward toward the center and is compressed without limit into what the equations call a singularity, a point of infinite density where our theories give up. Smolin suggested that the equations giving up is a clue, not a full stop. Perhaps the singularity is not truly a point of infinite crushing, but a bounce, a place where the collapsing matter is pinched off from our universe and blossoms outward on the other side into a brand new universe, with its own big bang, its own expanding space, its own future. From inside, we see a black hole swallowing a star. From the other side, unseen and unreachable, a new cosmos is being born. Every black hole in this picture is a doorway that only opens one way, and what comes through it is a world. Now add the crucial ingredient, the one that turns a strange idea into an evolutionary one. Smolin proposed that each new universe is born with physical constants slightly different from its parents. Small mutations in the strength of gravity, the masses of particles, the details that determine how a cosmos behaves. And here is the consequence. A universe whose constants happen to make lots of black holes will have lots of offspring, because each black hole is a birth. A universe whose constants make few black holes will have few children. So over countless generations, the family of universes drifts inevitably toward those settings that produce the most black holes, in exactly the way a population of animals drifts toward whatever helps them breed. The multiverse in this account is not random. It has been selected, and it has been selected for one thing above all others: darkness, the making of more black holes. Look at what that does to the meaning of our own home. Our universe is extraordinarily good at making black holes. Our galaxy alone is thought to contain something on the order of 100 million of them, the collapsed remains of dead giant stars, and at the centre of nearly every one of the hundreds of billions of galaxies sits a supermassive black hole, some of them billions of times the mass of our Sun. In Smolin's theory, each of these is not a monument to destruction, but a nursery. Every one of them is right now potentially seeding a new universe on the far side of its singularity, a child cosmos with its own slightly altered laws, its own potential for stars and planets, and perhaps for someone lying awake wondering what is outside. We are not a single creation. We are one generation in a breeding line that reaches back through parent after parent into a past we cannot trace, and forward through our own black holes into children we will never meet. Let yourself feel the fall for a moment. Imagine drifting toward one of these objects, past the point of no return, the horizon, where the escape you gave up is already behind you. The tidal forces stretch, and the light of the outside universe wraps and dims above you. Everything says you are ending, and if Smolin is right, you are not ending at all, or rather your ending is somebody else's dawn. The matter that made you is being folded down to a seed, and on the other side of that seed, in a place that has no direction from here, space is unfurling into a new morning that will never know your name. The most terrible object in the sky, reconsidered, is a cradle, and the sky is full of cradles. But now the theory turns and asks a question about you that is hard to shake off once you have heard it. If the constants of our universe were selected for their ability to make black holes, then what about all the other things those same constants happen to allow? The strength of gravity that lets a star collapse into a black hole is also the strength of gravity that lets clouds of gas condense into stars in the first place. The nuclear forces tuned to build the massive stars that later collapse are the same forces that build carbon and oxygen and the whole chemistry of life. In Smolin's picture, none of that fine-tuning is for us. The stars, the planets, the long chains of chemistry that led to a creature capable of asking this question, all of it is a side effect. We are what happens by accident along the way to making more black holes. The universe was not arranged so that you could exist. You are a byproduct of a universe arranged to reproduce, and your existence is incidental to its actual function, the way the warmth of a fire is incidental to the burning. That is a strange kind of loneliness, different from the loneliness of the bubbles. In the 10th theory, you are one of infinitely many copies. In this 9th one, you are not a copy at all, but something almost worse. You are a footnote to a process that is not about you, a flicker of complexity thrown off by machinery built for another purpose entirely. And whatever is outside our universe, in this theory, is a parent that has no idea we are here, because a parent universe cannot see into the black hole that birthed us any more than we can see into the ones we're birthing. The lineage is real, but every link in it is blind to every other. We are surrounded by relatives, ancestors stretching back beyond counting, descendants multiplying in the dark, and not one of them will ever know that any of the others existed. In fairness, I should tell you where this idea stands, because Smolin himself insisted it be treated as science, not as a story, and science means it must be possible to be wrong. He argued that his theory makes a testable prediction. If our universe is finely tuned to make as many black holes as possible, then we should not be able to easily imagine a small change to the constants that would make even more of them. Some physicists have pushed back, suggesting tweaks that might raise the black hole count, which would count against the theory. The debate is genuine and unresolved. The bounce inside a black hole is not established physics, because we have no accepted theory of what actually happens at a singularity. So once again, I am not asking you to believe. I am showing you a serious attempt by a serious physicist to answer where our universe came from, and pointing out that the answer places us inside a reproductive cycle we never agreed to and cannot perceive. I want to give Smolin his due on the matter of testing, because it is what separates his idea from pure storytelling, and it is genuinely clever. He argued that if our universe really has been selected to produce as many black holes as possible, then we should find ourselves at, or very near, a peak. It should be hard, maybe impossible, to imagine a small change to the constants of nature that would produce even more black holes than we already have. If someone could show that nudging the mass of a particle, or the strength of a force, would flood the cosmos with additional black holes, that would be evidence against the theory, because natural selection should already have found that peak long ago. So the theory sticks its neck out. It makes a prediction that could, in principle, be shown false, which is exactly what we ask of science, and rarely get from speculation about the outside. The debate that followed is real and unresolved, and it is worth knowing that it exists. Some physicists have pointed to particular tweaks that they argue would raise the black hole count, which would count against Smolin, and he and others have pushed back on whether those tweaks really work once you follow all their consequences. The whole exchange lives at the edge of what we understand about how stars die and what actually happens far inside a collapsing core, which is precisely the region where our physics is least certain. Nobody has a confirmed theory of what occurs at the singularity, and without one, the central claim that a bounce there gives birth to a new universe remains a possibility rather than a finding. I lay this out because intellectual honesty is the whole spine of a night like this. Smolin gave us a real theory, testable and daring, and the jury is genuinely still out. But even holding it as a possibility, notice what it has done to the meaning of fine-tuning, the same fine-tuning we met at the end of the last theory. In the bubble bath, our life-friendly constants were an accident, one lucky draw among infinite dead ones. Here they are not an accident and not a gift, but a consequence, a side effect of settings selected for something else entirely. In both cases, the universe was not arranged for us. In the foam, we are the winners of a lottery no one was running. In the family tree, we are the byproduct of a machine built to reproduce. Two theories, two very different mechanisms, and the same quiet verdict about our place. We keep asking whether the cosmos was made with us in mind, and the outside, in answer after answer, keeps saying no. And there is a quiet grandeur in the timescale this theory asks us to imagine, which is worth holding alongside the unease. If universes really do reproduce through black holes, with each generation slightly altered from the last, then the lineage that led to ours is almost unfathomably long. The mother universe that birthed ours had its own mother, and that one another, back and back through a chain of generations so long that the 13.8 billion years of our own cosmos is only the latest short chapter. We would not be the beginning of anything. We would be a single page, somewhere in the middle of a book whose earlier chapters are written in a language we cannot read, the language of singularities and bounces in universes that ended before ours began. And the book is not finished. Every black hole forming in the sky tonight is the opening line of a chapter that will be written long after the last star in our universe has gone cold, in a place we helped create and will never see. There is something almost consoling in that, if you let it be, the sense of belonging to a story far older and far longer than the one we thought we were in, even if no chapter can ever read the others. Notice what has happened across these first two theories. We asked what is outside the universe, and the 10th answer said more universes side by side. The 9th answer said more universes, but stacked in time, in generations, a genealogy. In both, the outside is still made of universes, cosmoses, things enough like ours that we can almost picture them. But we are about to lose even that comfort. The 8th theory does not put the outside beside us in space, or before us in time. It puts it a fraction of an inch away, in a direction you cannot point to, in a dimension your body was never built to sense. And it says that everything we call reality is a single thin sheet, and that the sheets can touch. Keep the family tree in mind and step with me toward number 8, where the outside is close enough to reach, and that is exactly the problem. Part 3. The colliding membranes. The outside of the universe might be closer to you than the next room. It might be closer than the far side of the page you would be reading if this were a book. In the 8th theory, the thing on the other side of reality is not billions of light years away and not generations back in time, but pressed right up against us, a fraction of an inch away in a direction that no compass on Earth can point toward, because it is a direction your body has no way to move in. To understand how something can be that close and still be completely beyond reach, we have to talk about dimensions and about the possibility that our entire universe is a single thin sheet floating in a larger space. The story begins with an idea that sounds like science fiction but was born in serious theoretical physics. In 1999, two physicists, Lisa Randall and Raman Sundram, published work drawing on string theory that proposed something startling. Perhaps everything we call the universe, all of space, all of matter, every galaxy and every atom is confined to a membrane. Physicists shortened the word to brain. This brain has the 3 dimensions of space we move through, plus time, but it sits inside a larger space with an extra dimension, a space they called the bulk. Think of our whole reality as a single sheet of paper, enormously wide, holding everything we know, but with a thinness we cannot perceive, floating in a room whose full size we cannot enter. We are painted onto the sheet. The paint cannot lift off the page. Why can we not simply step off the brain and look around the bulk? The theory has an answer, and it is elegant. The particles that make you and the light you see by are, in this picture, tied to the brain. They cannot leave it, in the same way that a drawing cannot climb off the paper it is drawn on. Everything you could ever use to detect the outside, every instrument, every photon of light, is stuck to the sheet along with you. So the extra dimension could be right there, an enormous space extending away from our brain in a direction perpendicular to everything, and we would have no way to see it, no way to reach into it, no way even to point at it. When you try to point away from the brain, your arm only moves along the sheet, because that is the only kind of motion your body knows. The outside is not far, it is simply in a direction that does not exist for us. And here is the thought that makes this idea keep you up at night. If our universe is one sheet in the bulk, there is no reason it should be the only one. Other brains could hang in that same larger space, other universes parallel to ours, each one a self-contained reality painted on its own sheet. Some of them might be unimaginably distant across the bulk, but some might be close, hovering a hair's breadth away in that unreachable direction, so near that if you could only turn the right way you might see them, and yet as sealed off from us as if they were in another eternity. There could be a universe, full of its own stars and its own histories and perhaps its own living things, occupying the same space you occupy right now, offset from you by the thinnest possible margin in a dimension you will never touch. You would never know. The wall between us and it is not made of distance or of time. It is made of a direction, and that is a wall you can never cross. The idea grew stranger and more powerful when 2 other physicists, Paul Steinhardt and Neil Turok, took it and asked what would happen if 2 brains were to drift toward each other. Around the start of the 2000s, they developed what became known as the cyclic model, built on an earlier proposal with the tongue-twisting name ekpyrotic, from a Greek word for a universe born in fire. Their suggestion was startling in its simplicity. What if the Big Bang, the event we have always treated as the absolute beginning of everything, was not a beginning at all but a collision? What if 2 brains, drifting slowly toward each other across the bulk over unthinkable stretches of time, finally met, and the energy of that impact spread across the entire sheet at once, was the fire we now call the birth of our universe? Follow the consequences because they reorganize everything. If the Big Bang was a collision, then there was a before. There was a universe here already, on this brain, running through its own long history until the other brain arrived and the impact filled it with fresh energy and reset it, wiping the slate and beginning the expansion we now live inside. And if it happened once, the model says it can happen again. The brains, after colliding, separate, drift apart, and then, over a span of time that dwarfs the entire age of our universe, perhaps every trillion years, they are drawn back together for another collision, another reset, another Big Bang. Not a single creation, but a heartbeat, expanding and colliding and beginning again, forever. Our 13.8 billion years, the whole story of our cosmos from its first light to this quiet moment, would be a single beat in a rhythm without beginning or end. I want you to be in the moment of a collision, because the model asks us to take it literally. You're standing outside on an ordinary night, the sky its usual dark, the familiar handful of stars overhead. Somewhere in the bulk, in that direction you cannot name, the other brain has been approaching for longer than there have been minds to fear it, and now it is close. and then the sky does not brighten from one direction, the way a sunrise comes up in the east. It brightens everywhere at once, in every part of the sky, and in the space between your own hands, because the arrival is not coming from a place within our world. It is coming from outside all places, and it touches every point of our brain in the same instant. There is no horizon to turn away from, no distance to put between yourself and it, no shelter far enough down, because there is no direction in which the collision is not happening. Every atom in the universe meets the incoming sheet simultaneously. Hold that instant, the last instant, the one before the light. There is no scream long enough to fit inside it, and then it is over, and it is also beginning. Every star, every planet, every structure, every memory held in every mind across the whole of our universe is erased and replaced by a smooth bath of new energy, out of which, over the following billions of years, fresh galaxies will slowly form, fresh stars, fresh worlds, and eventually, perhaps, fresh minds that will look up and assume, as we do, that their beginning was the beginning of everything. They will have no way to know that we were here. The collision leaves no memory. It does not preserve the dead. It does not even preserve the fact that there was anything to preserve. Whatever we built, whatever we loved, whatever we understood, meets the far brain and is gone as if it had never been, and the universe that replaces us starts clean, innocent of our entire existence. Let me be careful and fair, because this is a real scientific proposal and it deserves an honest accounting. The cyclic model is a genuine competitor to standard inflation, put forward by respected physicists and developed in mathematical detail. But it remains a minority view, and it faces hard technical challenges, and it rests on string theory, whose extra dimensions and brains have never been directly observed. Nobody has detected the bulk. Nobody has seen another brain. The next collision, if the model is right, is trillions of years away, so far beyond any human timescale that it can never touch us or anyone we could imagine. So this is not a warning. It is a picture, a serious attempt to answer where the Big Bang came from, and its answer is that outside our universe is a larger space holding other universes, and that our beginning and our ending are the same kind of event, the meeting of two sheets in the dark. There is a piece of real evidence that makes this less fanciful than it sounds, and it hides in plain sight, in a fact about gravity that has puzzled physicists for a long time. Gravity is astonishingly weak. You might not think of it that way, since it holds you to the Earth and steers the planets, but compare it to the other forces and the weakness is almost absurd. A small magnet can lift a paperclip against the pull of the entire planet beneath it. The electric and nuclear forces are stronger than gravity by factors so large they are hard to write down. Physicists call this the hierarchy problem, and it is a genuine open puzzle. And one of the reasons Randall and Sundram built their brain world in the first place was that it offers a possible answer. Perhaps gravity is weak in our world, because gravity, unlike the other forces, is not stuck to our brain. Perhaps it alone can leak off the sheet, spilling out into the extra dimension of the bulk, so that only a faint remainder of its true strength reaches us. The forces we feel at full power are the ones trapped on the sheet with us. The one force that seems mysteriously feeble is the one that is quietly draining away into the outside. If that is right, then gravity is not just a force. It is a messenger from the bulk, the one part of our physics that already reaches into the dimension we cannot see, carrying, in its very weakness, a rumour of the larger space beyond our world. I have to be honest that this is not confirmed. No experiment has yet caught gravity leaking, and the extra dimensions remain unproven. But it is a haunting thought that the most familiar force in your life, the one holding you in your chair right now, might be weak precisely because most of it is somewhere you can never go, and sit for a moment with the strangeness of a neighbouring brain that shares your space. We're used to thinking that if something is close, we should be able to reach it, and if we cannot reach it, it must be far away. The brain world breaks that intuition completely. Another entire universe could be occupying the very room you are in, its stars and its histories overlapping the space of your body, offset from you by no distance at all in any direction you know, separated only by a shift along the hidden axis of the bulk. You could be, at this instant, passing through a forest, or an ocean, or a city on another brain, and feel nothing, because nothing on that sheet can touch anything on yours. Closeness, in the bulk, is not the same as reachability. the nearest thing in existence might be the most permanently sealed away. Notice how far we have already travelled from the ordinary idea of an edge with a wall. 3 theories in, and the outside has gone from a foam of bubbles to a tree of parent universes to a stack of membranes a fingernail's width away in a forbidden direction. But through all 3, there has been an unspoken assumption, so quiet you may not have noticed it. In every one of these theories, the outside has been unaware of us. The bubbles do not watch us. The parent universes cannot see us. The neighbouring brains drift blindly. The outside so far has been scenery. It has been furniture. That is about to change. The 7th theory is the first one in which the thing outside our universe knows that we are here, is paying attention, and has, if it wishes, the power to switch us off. Keep the colliding sheets in mind and come with me to number 7, where the outside for the first time is looking back. Part 4. The server farm. Every theory so far has left one thing mercifully intact. Whatever is outside our universe, it did not know we were here. The bubbles inflate without noticing us. The parent universes cannot see through the black holes that birthed us. The neighbouring brains drift by blind. But the 7th theory removes that last comfort, and it does so using an argument that is almost impossible to shake once you have understood it. It proposes that outside our universe there is a mind and machinery, and that our entire reality is running inside that machinery as a kind of program. And unlike the wild speculations you might expect, this idea comes not from mysticism, but from a careful piece of philosophical reasoning that has troubled serious thinkers for more than 20 years. The argument was laid out in 2003 by a philosopher named Nick Bostrom, and its power is that it does not ask you to believe anything strange about technology. It only asks you to follow a chain of reasoning. Suppose that it is possible, in principle, for a sufficiently advanced civilization to build computers powerful enough to simulate conscious minds, whole worlds full of them, so detailed that the simulated people believe themselves to be real. We are not talking about the crude video games of today, but about simulations so complete that the beings inside them think and feel and wonder exactly as you are wondering now. If that is possible, Bostrom argued, then consider what follows. Any civilization that reaches that level of power and chooses to run such simulations would probably not run just one. They would run thousands, or millions, or billions of them, the way we casually spin up countless copies of a program today. Now do the counting, because the counting is where the floor tips beneath you. If simulated realities far outnumber the one original, physical reality, then when you ask which kind of reality any given conscious being is likely to find itself in, the answer is overwhelming. For every real world there would be a multitude of simulated ones, each full of minds convinced of their own reality. So a randomly chosen observer, asking whether they live in the base reality or in a simulation, should bet, on the raw numbers, that they are simulated. And you are a randomly chosen observer. You have no special evidence that you are one of the rare originals rather than one of the countless copies. The conclusion is not that we are definitely in a simulation. Bostrom was careful about that. The conclusion is that at least one of 3 things must be true. Either civilizations almost always destroy themselves before they gain this power, or they gain it and choose never to use it, or we are almost certainly living inside a simulation right now. Pick whichever you like. Each one changes how you see the sky. But the argument, as Bostrom framed it, leaves the most vertiginous question politely unasked. Suppose we are in a simulation. Then what is outside it? The easy answer is a computer, a machine, and somewhere a programmer. But do not stop at the hardware, because the hardware implies a world. Outside our universe, in this theory, there is a civilization advanced enough to build worlds, and around them an infrastructure that may be running not just our reality, but an enormous number of others at the same time. Picture it as a server farm of cosmoses, rows upon rows of running universes, each one humming away in its own isolation, each one populated by beings who look up at their own stars and feel certain that their reality is the fundamental one. Ours would be one process among a great many, and the space outside our universe would be, of all things, a room. A room with machines in it, and the machines are dreaming us. Here is where the theory grows teeth, and the teeth are made of a very ordinary fact. Every simulation costs something to run. Every conscious mind that is being computed requires computation, and computation is never free. It takes power and memory and time, and those are always finite, even for a civilization far beyond us. which means that somewhere outside our universe, someone or something is managing resources, deciding how much to spend on which worlds, prioritizing some simulations and neglecting others, and inevitably shutting some down, the ones that grow too expensive or too slow or simply too dull to be worth the cost of continuing. The unsettling images almost write themselves. Administrators reviewing which universes are performing, decisions about which realities are renewed and which are quietly ended. Somewhere out there, perhaps, a version of the mundane bureaucracy that governs anything run at scale, except that the thing being budgeted is everything you have ever known, and that leads to the quietest and heaviest part of the whole idea. If our universe is one simulation among many, then we are, in some sense, competing for attention and for resources against other worlds we will never see or hear of. The civilization outside might have favourites. They might have a reality they consider their finest work, lavished with detail and care, while ours runs in the background, half-watched, a project someone started and forgot to close, consuming memory while no one really looks. We might be the cosmic equivalent of a window left open on a crowded screen. And somewhere out there, in that room we cannot enter, there would be an off switch. It has never been used on us. But nothing in the theory promises that it never will be, and nothing gives us any way to influence the hand that rests near it. I want to pause on the strangest feature of this, because it is a thread we will pick up again later tonight, more than once. If our universe were switched off, you would not feel it. There would be no warning, no flicker, no sense of an ending. From inside, nothing would change, because there would be no inside anymore for anything to change within. The same is true if the simulation were paused for 1,000 years and then resumed. You would step across the gap without ever knowing there had been one. And the same is true if the whole thing has been running for only a moment, with all your memories loaded in ready-made, a childhood you never actually lived inserted as backstory. Every test you could think of to check whether you are simulated would itself be part of the simulation. This is the first appearance of a quiet idea that will return to haunt the rest of this list. The largest facts about your existence might be things you could never, even in principle, feel from the inside. Let me set the honesty straight, because it matters most exactly where the idea is most seductive. The simulation argument is philosophy, not physics. It is a serious argument, taken seriously by serious people, but it is a chain of reasoning about probabilities, not a measurement of the world. No one has ever found a glitch. The stories you may have heard about supposed cracks in reality or limits in the physics that betray a hidden computer are speculation piled on speculation. Some physicists have proposed that a simulated universe might show subtle signatures, like a smallest possible scale to space, but nothing of the kind has been confirmed, and there are ordinary physical reasons for such features that have nothing to do with computers. So I am not telling you that you are a program. I am telling you that a careful philosopher followed a simple chain of logic and arrived at a conclusion he could not escape, and that the conclusion places, outside our universe, the first thing on our list that is aware of us, and able, if it chooses, to end us. I want to walk slowly through the 3 doors Bostrom's argument leaves us, because each one is its own quiet unease, and most people rush past them to argue about the third. The first door is that civilizations almost always destroy themselves, or otherwise falter, before they ever reach the power to simulate conscious minds. If that is the truth, then the reason we are probably not in a simulation is grim, because it means that something reliably stops civilizations like ours, that the road we're on nearly always ends before it gets that far, and that our own future is shadowed by whatever that obstacle is. The second door is that such civilizations do arise and gain the power, and then, almost without exception, choose never to use it, deciding that simulating conscious beings is wrong, or pointless, or forbidden. That requires a near-perfect unanimity of restraint across countless independent civilizations, which is a strange thing to count on, given how rarely any group of us agrees on anything. And the third door is the one everyone talks about. If neither of the first two holds, then simulated minds far outnumber real ones, and we are almost certainly among them. There is a feature of the third door that folds back into our whole descent tonight, and I want to flag it now, because it returns at the very end of this list. If a civilization can simulate a universe, then the beings inside that simulated universe might, in time, become advanced enough to run simulations of their own, and the beings inside those might do the same. You get simulations nested inside simulations, worlds within worlds, each layer convinced it is the base reality, each one running still further worlds beneath it. The outside of our universe might not be a single room with a single machine, but one floor in a tower of nested realities, and the beings just above us, the ones running our world, might themselves be running inside someone else's machine, unaware, exactly as we are. Hold that image lightly for now. We will meet its purest form when we reach number 1. And there is a particular version of this that philosophers find especially likely, if any of it is true. A civilization advanced enough to simulate whole worlds might be most interested in simulating its own past, running detailed recreations of its ancestors to study its own history, the way we run models of the climate or of ancient battles. If that is common, then the simulated beings would tend to be recreations of earlier eras, which raises an unsettling little question about us. We happen to live at the hinge moment, the point in history just before a civilization might gain the power to make such simulations. That is exactly the kind of moment a later civilization would find most worth rerunning, the turning point, the eve of everything. Of all the times to find yourself alive, this one, right on the threshold, is suspiciously interesting. I find that the hardest part of this theory to sit with is not the fear of being switched off, but the smallness it implies, and I want to name it plainly because it is a different feeling from the others. In every theory before this one, our universe was at least the whole of the story from our own point of view, the entire stage, even if it was one of many stages. Here, for the first time, our reality might be minor. Not the main project, not the one they are proud of, just one of billions of running worlds, and perhaps not even a favoured one, the sort of thing that gets left running in a forgotten corner, while attention goes to something more interesting elsewhere. We are used to feeling small against the size of the cosmos, the enormous distances, the ancient timescales. This is a different smallness. It is the smallness of possibly not mattering to the one thing that could see the whole picture, of being a modest entry in someone else's catalogue of worlds. And the strange twist is that we would have no way to earn our way out of it, no way to become the masterpiece, because from inside the running program, there is nothing we could do to make the ones outside care. We can only keep running, and hope we stay interesting enough to keep the lights on. Consider how the outside has changed under our feet. It began as scenery, indifferent and blind. Now, at number 7, it has a mind and resources and a kind of power over us. But notice the strange comfort that even this theory still offers, a comfort you might not have noticed you were leaning on. The simulators, whoever they are still like us. They have computers and limits and priorities. They live in a world with rooms and machines and decisions. They are strange and powerful, but they are recognizable. The 6th theory takes that last handhold away. It asks us to imagine beings for whom our walls are not walls, our privacy is not privacy, our very bodies are open pages, beings who could reach into the middle of a sealed room without crossing its boundary, because from where they stand there is no boundary at all. To meet them, we have to talk about what it really means to live inside a certain number of dimensions, and what it would mean for something to live in more. Keep the server farm in mind and step with me toward number 6. Part 5. The Parent Dimension. Imagine a being that could see inside your body without opening it. Not with X-rays, not with any instrument, but simply by looking, the way you can look down at the inside of a circle drawn on paper and see every point within it at once. Imagine that this being could reach into a sealed vault, a locked room, the middle of a solid block of steel, and place its hand there without passing through any wall, without breaking anything, because from where it stands there are no walls to pass through. Everything you think of as closed, as hidden, as protected, would be open to it, laid flat and exposed. The 6th theory says that such beings may be entirely real, that they may live just outside our universe, and that the reason we cannot see them is not that they are far away, but that they exist in a direction we were never built to look. To understand how this could possibly work, we have to go back more than a century, to a quiet piece of mathematics that even its author was not sure what to do with. In 1919, a German mathematician named Theodor Kaluza sent Albert Einstein a paper containing a strange and beautiful result. Einstein had recently reshaped our understanding of gravity, describing it as the bending of space and time. Kaluza asked what would happen if you wrote down Einstein's equations, but for a universe with one more dimension of space than we observe, 5 instead of the familiar 4 of space and time together. And something almost magical fell out of the mathematics. When he added that extra dimension, the equations did not just describe gravity. They also, all on their own, produced the equations for electricity and magnetism, the other great force known at the time. Two forces that had seemed completely unrelated emerged as different aspects of geometry in a higher dimensional space. It was as if, by adding a single hidden direction, the universe's separate rulebooks merged into one. Einstein was startled and hesitant, and it took him some time before he endorsed the idea and helped bring it forward. A few years later, in 1926, a physicist named Oscar Klein refined it, and the combined proposal became known as Kaluza-Klein theory. Klein offered an answer to the obvious objection. If there is a fifth dimension, why has no one ever seen it? Why can we not move in that direction? His suggestion was that the extra dimension is curled up impossibly small, wound so tightly around every point in space that it is far too tiny to notice or to enter. The way a garden hose seen from a great distance looks like a one-dimensional line, even though up close its surface has a second dimension wrapped around it. The extra direction would be everywhere, threaded through every point of the world, and yet hidden by its own smallness. This idea did not fade, it grew. When physicists later developed string theory, their most ambitious attempt to unite all the forces of nature into a single framework, they found that the mathematics only works if the universe has not 4 dimensions, and not 5, but 10 or 11. 6 or 7 extra dimensions of space beyond the 3 we know, all of them, in the standard telling, curled up smaller than any instrument could ever probe, folded into shapes of astonishing intricacy at every point in what looks to us like empty space. If string theory is right, you are at this very moment surrounded by extra dimensions, wrapped through the tip of your finger and the space before your eyes, and you cannot feel them because they are smaller than anything you could feel. But now we come to the turn that makes this a theory about the outside, and it is a simple, dangerous question. What if the extra dimensions are not all curled up small? What if at least one of them is large, stretching outward indefinitely, and our entire familiar universe is only a thin slice of a much bigger reality that extends away from us in a direction we cannot perceive? In that case, everything we call the cosmos, all our galaxies, all our space, would be like a single flat sheet living inside a larger, higher dimensional world, and the outside of our universe would be, quite literally, the rest of that larger space, spread out in a direction perpendicular to everything we know. We would be a shadow, a 3-dimensional projection cast by structures we lack the senses to see. There is a way to feel the force of this, and it comes from a small book written well over a century ago about an imaginary world called Flatland, a world of only 2 dimensions, inhabited by flat shapes who live on the surface of a plane. A creature in Flatland can move left and right, forward and back, but has no concept of up, because up does not exist for them. Now imagine you, a 3-dimensional being, leaning over their flat world. You can see everything in it at once. You can see inside their houses, because their walls are only lines and you are looking down from above them. You can see inside their bodies, every organ laid open to your view, not because you have cut them open, but because from your vantage above the plane, their insides are simply not hidden. You could reach one finger down and touch a point in the very centre of a locked Flatland room, and to the creatures inside a shape would simply appear out of nowhere, in a sealed space, having come from no direction they can name. You did not break in. From where you stand, there was never anything to break. Now raise the whole picture by 1 dimension, and put us in the place of the flat creatures. If beings exist in a space of 4 spatial dimensions, with us as their Flatland, then everything that is true of you looking down at the plane is true of them looking at us. They would see inside our sealed rooms as easily as you see inside a drawn circle. They would see inside our bodies, every cell and every beating vessel, not by opening us, but simply by looking from a direction we cannot point to. They could reach into the centre of anything, a safe, a skull, a stone, and place something there, or take something away, without crossing a single wall, because to them our walls do not enclose anything. They enclose only 3 of the dimensions, and the 4th is wide open, a door we do not even know is there, standing permanently ajar. Let the asymmetry of this settle on you, because the asymmetry is the whole horror and the whole wonder of it. They could see us completely, and we could not see them at all. There is no symmetry to appeal to, no way for us to look back. Our eyes gather light that travels within our 3 dimensions, Our instruments measure the 3 dimensions of space and the one of time and nothing else, because nothing else is what they are made of. Anything existing outside that framework is, by its very nature, invisible to us, not because it is hidden or shy, but because we have no capacity even in principle to register it. A 4-dimensional being could stand, if standing is the word, at what we would call the center of your chest, closer to you than your own skin, watching every thought take shape in the electricity of your brain, and you would feel nothing, notice nothing, and go on believing you were alone in a closed room. And such beings would not need to be gods or spirits for any of this to hold. They would only need to live in more dimensions than we do. The mathematics does not require them to be benevolent or hostile or even interested. It only points out that if they exist, the relationship between us and them is one of total exposure on our side and total concealment on theirs. They might have been there for the whole of our history, present at every private moment any human has ever had, watching from a vantage we cannot conceive and cannot guard against, and there would be no experiment we could run to catch them, no wall we could build to keep them out, no corner of the world or of the self that would be closed to their view. The genuinely unnerving part is what an interaction would look like from our side, if one of these beings ever chose to reach in. To us, a 4-dimensional action would have no visible cause. An object would appear where nothing could have put it. Something solid and sealed would be found open, or changed, or gone, with no breach, no entry, no explanation available within our physics, because the cause did not occur within our physics. It came from outside the whole framework in which we look for causes. We would be left to call such an event a miracle if it helped us and a catastrophe if it harmed us, and either way we would be describing an effect whose source is permanently beyond our reach, an intervention from a direction that our language does not contain a word for. I owe you the honest accounting again, and here it is genuinely delicate because this theory sits on real physics and then walks past its edge. The mathematics of extra dimensions is not fringe. Kaluza-Klein theory is real, string theory is a serious and heavily studied framework, and the idea that our universe might be a slice, a brain, inside a higher dimensional bulk is exactly the same idea we met in the last theory, taken from a slightly different angle. What is not established, what crosses from physics into speculation, is the claim that there are conscious beings out there in the higher dimensions, watching us. There is no evidence of that. It is a thought experiment about what the geometry would permit, not a report of anything observed, and the stories you may have heard that higher dimensional entities are behind ghosts, or visitations, or unexplained events, are exactly that, stories, with no support beyond the very human hunger to populate the dark. The honest position is that the extra dimensions may be real, and the watchers are imagined, and that the imagining is worth doing only because it shows us cleanly how something could be right beside us and forever beyond our sight. It is worth pausing on how gentle the beginning of this idea was, because it shows how ordinary mathematics can open onto something enormous. Kaluza did not set out to populate the outside with beings. He set out to tidy up a set of equations, and he found that a single extra dimension made 2 great forces fall into one. That is the pattern again and again in this part of physics. Someone follows the mathematics honestly, asking only what makes the equation simpler or more unified, and the mathematics answers with extra dimensions, hidden directions, a larger space that was not part of the question. The higher dimensions were not invented to be frightening. They were the price of a more elegant description of the world, and the strangeness came free with the elegance, whether anyone wanted it or not. And that is why the possibility of higher beings, however speculative, cannot be simply laughed away. It does not rest on wanting there to be watchers or spirits. It rests on the plain geometric fact that if a larger space exists, then things could exist within it, and anything that did would stand in the same relation to us that we stand in to a drawing on a page. The theory does not promise such beings, it only refuses to rule them out, and it shows, with uncomfortable clarity, that if they were there, our confidence in our own privacy, in the solidity of our walls and the secrecy of our thoughts, would be nothing more than the confidence of a flat figure who has never once looked up because up is not a direction it can imagine. Consider once more how the outside has transformed as we have descended this list. It was scenery. Then it gained a mind, in the machinery of the simulators. Now, in the higher dimensions, it gains not just a mind but a vantage, a place to stand from which we are utterly open, and it takes from us the last thing we thought we still had, which was the privacy of the sealed room and the inside of the skull. And yet, even now, the outside is still a place, a larger space, with more directions in it, a somewhere. That is the next thing to go, because the fifth theory does not ask what larger space surrounds us. It asks what happens if you keep going outward past the last of the space, past the last dimension, past the final edge of everything that exists, and it proposes that what waits there is not a bigger somewhere at all, but the one thing we have never truly faced. Not darkness, not emptiness, nothing. Keep the higher dimensions in mind, and come with me, carefully, to number 5, where the outside stops being a place and becomes the absence of one. Part 6. The Void of True Nothing. We have reached the middle of our descent, and this is where the ground changes under us. Every theory so far has answered the question of what is outside the universe by offering us a something. More universes, a family of them, other membranes, a room full of machines, higher dimensions with beings in them. In each case, the outside was a place, or a thing, or at least a somewhere. The fifth theory refuses that comfort entirely. It proposes that outside our universe there is no place at all, no larger space, no dimension, no substance, nothing that could hold a being or a machine or another world. It proposes that the outside is genuine nothing, and it asks us to look, for the first time, at what that word actually means. The question at the root of this theory is one of the oldest that human beings have ever asked, and one of the few that has never been answered. Why is there something rather than nothing? Why is there a universe at all instead of just blank absence forever? Most people, when they first consider it, quietly assume that nothing is the natural state, the default, and that it is the existence of something that needs explaining. And that assumption points at a chilling possibility. If nothing is the default, then perhaps our universe is a small, temporary exception, a bubble of something surrounded on all sides by the nothing that would otherwise be everywhere. Perhaps the outside is simply the default reasserting itself, waiting patiently at the edge of everything we have built. But before we can look at that edge, I have to take something away from you, because almost everyone, including scientists and casual speech, uses the word nothing to mean the wrong thing. When you picture nothing, you probably picture empty space, blackness, a perfect vacuum, with no stars, no atoms, no light. But that is not nothing. That is something, and a surprisingly busy something at that. Empty space has dimensions. It has a length and a width and a depth, directions you could move in. It has the capacity to hold things, and according to modern physics, it is never truly empty at all. The vacuum seethes with quantum fields, and out of those fields particles are constantly flickering into brief existence and vanishing again, a restless foam of activity at the smallest scales. The vacuum has properties and structure and energy. It is a stage, even when the stage is bare. And a stage is not nothing. True nothing has none of that. It has no dimensions, because dimensions are a feature of space, and there is no space. It has no time, no before and no after, because time too is part of the something we are trying to get outside of. It has no fields, no particles, no potential for particles, no laws for them to obey, because laws are a kind of something as well. It has no capacity to hold anything, because capacity is a property, and it has no properties. It cannot be measured, because there is nothing there to measure and nothing to measure it with. It cannot be entered, because there is nowhere to enter and no direction that leads to it. It is not a black room. It is the absence of the room, and of the walls, and of the space the room would have occupied, and of the very possibility of a room. I want to show you how strange the edge of our universe would be if this theory is right and our cosmos is finite. Come and stand at that edge with me. You cannot really go there, because the edge is not a place you could travel to, but let the imagination try, since that is the only instrument we have for this. You are at the very boundary of everything, the last outpost of space itself, and ahead of you is the edge. Now reach out your hand and try to push it past the boundary into what lies beyond, and feel the sentence fail as you say it. There is no beyond for your hand to enter. There is no space on the far side for your fingers to occupy, no direction that counts as forward once forward runs out of world. Your hand does not meet resistance because resistance is something. It does not pass into darkness because darkness is something. There is simply no next inch. The idea of moving your hand outward stops meaning anything. the way a step stops meaning anything when there is no longer any floor, not even the absence of a floor, not even the space where a floor might have been. You're pressing against the end of the meaning of the word outward, and here is the part that I think is genuinely the most frightening idea on this entire list. More than the copies of you, more than the collisions, more than the watchers, if something from our universe were to touch true nothing, it would not be destroyed. Destruction is a process. Destruction leaves ash or heat or scattered pieces, or at the very least a memory, a fact that something used to be here and now is gone. True nothing offers none of that. A thing that met it would not be broken apart or burned away. It would simply cease to have ever been, not die, unhappen. The information that defined it would not be erased because erasing is also a process, a something that acts on a something. It would be as if the thing had never existed in the first place, with no trace, no gap where it used to be, no one left to notice the absence, because even the absence would be an absence of nothing. Stay with that distinction for a moment, because it is the emotional core of this theory, and it is worth feeling clearly. We fear death, all of us, but death is an ending, and an ending is still a kind of event. When someone dies, they were here, and that fact remains true forever. The world carries the shape of where they were. Death subtracts you from the present but leaves you standing in the past. Unbeing does not. Unbeing is not an ending but a revision, a quiet correction to the list of things that ever were, in which your name is not crossed out but simply was never written. There is no version of you that used to exist. There is no moment that used to hold you. The most terrible thing is not that you might stop. It is that you might be unstarted, and that from the far side of true nothing there would be nothing left to have lost you, not even the fact that there had been anything to lose. Everything we have ever meant by the word gone assumes a world that remains to be haunted. True nothing does not leave a world behind. Some thinkers have gone further and tried to give this void a role in physics, though here we are leaving firm ground, and I will say so plainly. There is a speculative image in which our universe is slowly expanding into this nothing, the fabric of space stretching outward moment by moment, displacing the absence with presence, so that the boundary between being and non-being is always creeping a little further out. And in some versions of that image, the nothing is not passive. It pushes. The accelerating expansion of our universe, the strange fact that distant galaxies are flying apart faster and faster, is reimagined as pressure from the other side, the nothing pressing back against the something that has temporarily displaced it. I want to be very clear that this is metaphor reaching toward physics, not established physics itself. The acceleration of the universe is real and measured, but its usual explanation is a property of space called dark energy, not a war with the void. Still, the image has a certain terrible logic to it, and it leads to a quiet conclusion. If the nothing is patient and the something is finite, then in the far, far future the void may simply win, and our universe will end not in fire and not in ice, but in the plain recognition that it was, all along, a brief exception to a rule that says there should be nothing here at all. Let me hold this theory honestly, because it is more philosophy than science, and it must be labelled as such. No experiment can reach true nothing by its own definition. So no experiment can confirm or deny that it lies outside our universe. It may even be that the question is confused, that a finite universe need not have an edge at all, the way the surface of the Earth is finite but has no edge you could fall off. Modern cosmology genuinely allows for a universe that is finite yet unbounded, curving back on itself so that there is no outside to worry about. So this is not a claim I am asking you to accept. It is the honest terminus of one particular way of taking the question seriously, the way that refuses to fill the outside with anything at all. And what it delivers, at the end of that refusal, is the recognition that the hardest thing to imagine is not an infinity of universes, but a single, complete absence, and that we do not even have the words for it, because every word we own was built by and for a world that exists. This question has a long lineage, and it is worth knowing that the sharpest minds in history found it unanswerable too. The philosopher Gottfried Leibniz, more than 3 centuries ago, called it the first question that should be asked, why there is something rather than nothing, and he could not resolve it except by appeal to something outside the chain of ordinary causes. Every ordinary explanation, after all, explains one thing in terms of another thing. We explain the tree by the seed by the parent tree, the rain by the clouds by the ocean and the sun. But that kind of explanation always assumes there is already something to work with. It can tell you why this something took that form. It can never tell you why there is any something at all rather than the blank alternative. Because the moment you reach for an explanation, you have already assumed a world full of things to do the explaining. The absolute question stands outside the reach of the only kind of answering we know how to do. And I should be fair and say that many cosmologists suspect the whole worry may rest on a confusion, and their reason is worth holding on to as a counterweight. A finite universe need not have an edge at all. Think of the surface of the Earth. It is finite. You can measure its area. You will not walk forever. And yet it has no edge, no boundary, no place where the ground stops and you could fall off, because it curves back on itself. You can walk in any direction as long as you like and never once reach a rim. Modern cosmology genuinely allows our universe to be like that. Finite but unbounded, curving through higher dimensions so that space closes smoothly on itself, with no edge anywhere, and therefore no outside to open onto nothing. If that is the shape of things, then the void at the edge is a fear about an edge that does not exist. It is a real and respectable possibility, and it is the gentlest thing anyone can say about this particular theory, that the terrible boundary might simply not be there. Notice the hinge we have just crossed, because the second half of tonight lives on the far side of it. For 4 theories, the outside was a something, and it kept gaining powers, a mind, a vantage, until it could see us and end us. Then, at this midpoint, we tried the opposite move, and asked whether the outside might be nothing at all, and found that even nothing, properly understood, is more terrifying than any something. So now we are caught between 2 unbearable answers. Either the outside is a something so strange it unmakes our privacy and our safety, or it is a nothing so complete it unmakes the very idea of ever having been. And it is exactly here, poised between those two, that the remaining theories do something new. They stop looking outward for the answer, and they start looking at us. They begin to suggest that whatever is outside is not indifferent scenery or blank absence, but something that is watching, or dreaming, or thinking us, and that our relationship to it is the realest fact about our lives. The 4th theory begins that turn. It takes the watchers we imagined in the higher dimensions and asks a harder question about them. Not whether they can see us, but whether they already know, completely and in advance, exactly how our story ends. Keep the edge of nothing in your mind and come with me to number 4. Part 7. The Watchers. For more than 60 years we have been listening to the sky, and the sky has said nothing back. In 1961, the astronomer Frank Drake wrote down a now famous equation, a way of estimating how many communicating civilizations might exist in our galaxy. And when reasonable numbers are put into it, the answer that tends to come out is that we should have company, perhaps a great deal of it. Our galaxy holds hundreds of billions of stars, many with planets, many of those planets gentle enough for life. And yet, after decades of searching, we have heard nothing. No signals, no beacons, no evidence that anyone else is out there at all. This silence has a name, the Fermi paradox, and the 4th theory offers an answer to it that is stranger than any we have met so far. Perhaps the sky is silent not because no one is there, but because the ones who matter are no longer inside our universe to be heard. The idea builds directly on the higher dimensions we explored a moment ago, and it asks a simple question about what a civilization might do with unlimited time. Suppose a species arises somewhere and survives and keeps advancing, not for centuries but for millions or billions of years. What would be the ultimate destination of such a civilization? One speculative answer is that they would not stay inside their home universe forever. They would find a way out. Just as we imagine, in the brain world picture, that our reality is a sheet floating in a larger space, a sufficiently advanced civilization might learn to leave the sheet, to step off into the bulk, into the higher dimensional space that surrounds all universes, the way a creature might climb out of a pond onto the land around it. They would abandon their cosmos of origin the way an insect abandons the shell it grew up in, leaving the whole universe behind and taking up residence outside it. And from that new vantage, everything would look different. A being standing outside our universe in the higher space would not be limited to seeing one cosmos at a time. It might see many, or all of them, spread out below it like a field of lights, each universe a self-contained world running through its history. And crucially, it would not be trapped inside time the way we are. We experience time as a river, carried helplessly from a past we cannot revisit toward a future we cannot see. But time, as we have learned again and again tonight, is part of the fabric of our universe, part of the something we're trying to get outside of. A being that had genuinely stepped outside would stand outside our time as well, and from there, our past and our future would not be separated by any river at all. They would lie open together all at once, the way the pages of a finished book lie together on a shelf, the ending as present and as readable as the beginning. Consider what that means about us specifically, and take it slowly because it is a heavy thing. If such observers exist outside our universe, then they have very likely been watching for a long time, longer than our whole recorded history, longer than our species has existed. From their position outside time, there is no need to wait for our story to unfold, because it does not unfold for them. It simply is, complete, laid out end to end. They have seen every empire that has ever risen and everyone that has fallen. They have witnessed every private act of tenderness and every act of cruelty that any human being has ever committed, all of it visible at once from a vantage we cannot even face toward. And they know how we end. Not predict, not estimate. Know. Because from outside time, the last day of the human species is not in the future. It is just another page, already written, already read, sitting on the shelf beside all the others. Sit with the particular quality of that idea, because it is different from ordinary mortality. We all know that we will die, and that our species someday will end, but we carry that knowledge as an abstraction, softened by the fact that we do not know the details, the when or the how, and so the future feels open, unwritten, ours to shape. The Watchers take that openness away. If they exist, then the details are not undetermined and waiting. They are fixed and known by someone right now. The date of our extinction is a fact that already sits in an archive outside our universe, complete with everything that led to it and everything that came after, and the only reason it feels open to us is that we are trapped inside the book and cannot read ahead. To them, our sense that the future is unwritten is simply a symptom of our confinement, a small illusion produced by living inside time instead of above it. And what would we be to such beings? Not their equals, and not their enemies, because you cannot be the enemy of something you cannot see, cannot reach, cannot affect. We would be their data, their case studies, perhaps their entertainment. Our wars, which cost us everything, would be to them a pattern worth noting, a recurring behaviour catalogued across 1,000 civilizations in 1,000 universes. Our discoveries, the ones we are proudest of, the equations and the telescopes and the long climb toward understanding, would be footnotes, small entries in an immense record. Our extinction, when it comes, would be filed alongside billions of others, one more civilization that rose and reached and ended, its complete history archived in a place that exists beyond the reach of any universe, including ours. We would be watched, thoroughly and without malice, and we would never watch back, and we would never even know that we were the subject of anyone's attention. There is a further turn, and it is the one that gives this theory its particular ache. The Watchers do not intervene. Whatever they see, they let it happen. Perhaps out of some principle, a cosmic ethics that forbids meddling in the histories they observe. Perhaps out of indifference, the way we might watch weather without any impulse to change it. Perhaps because, from outside time, there is nothing to intervene in, since our story is already whole and cannot be edited any more than you can edit a book you are only reading. But whatever the reason, the result is the same. If we suffer, they watch. If we destroy ourselves, they watch. They could perhaps tell us how our story ends, and they never will, because they do not act, they only observe, and somewhere in their records the chapter on our species is already complete, every word of it, waiting for the events it describes to play out on schedule in the small confined theatre of our time, before an audience we cannot see. I have to be especially careful with the honesty here, because this theory has drifted a long way from anything measurable, and I do not want to dress speculation up as science. There is no evidence whatsoever that such observers exist. The Fermi paradox is real. The silence of the sky is a genuine puzzle, and Drake's equation is a real and useful way of organizing our ignorance. But the idea of civilizations escaping into the bulk to become timeless watchers is pure speculation, a thought experiment, not a finding. It has no data behind it, and it likely never could, since by its own logic the watchers are undetectable. I include it not because it is likely, but because it is the first theory to make the outside not just aware of us, but morally related to us, watchers with a choice about whether to intervene, and because it forces a question worth sitting with. If something outside our universe already knows how our story ends, does that change how we should live inside it? I do not think it does, but the question is worth the discomfort. Before you dismiss the idea of standing outside time as pure fantasy, I want to point out that a version of it comes straight out of ordinary, well-tested physics, and it may be the strangest thing on this list that is actually mainstream. Einstein's relativity, which we have leaned on all night, treats time as a dimension much like space, woven together with it into a single fabric. And in the most straightforward reading of that theory, the one many physicists accept, the past and the future are just as real as the present. The moment of your birth and the moment of your death are both out there in the fabric, fixed points, no less real than this one. What we call the present, the sense that now is special and the future has not happened yet, may be a feature of how we experience the fabric from the inside, not a feature of the fabric itself. Physicists call this the block universe, and it is not fringe. It is one of the standard ways of understanding what relativity is telling us. If that is right, then our whole story already exists, laid out along the time dimension, complete from beginning to end, and our feeling that the future is open and unwritten is a kind of illusion produced by travelling through the block one moment at a time. Now notice what the Watcher's theory does. It simply asks what it would be like to step off that one-way path and see the block from outside, the way you can step back from a painting and see the whole canvas instead of one brushstroke. We cannot do that. We're stuck moving through time. But nothing in principle forbids a being that is not stuck, and to such a being our completed story would be exactly as visible as a finished film is to someone holding the reel. The unsettling part of the Watchers is not that they see the future. It is that, if the block universe is right, the future is already there to be seen, and the only thing keeping us from it is that we are inside the film instead of holding it. That reframes the silence of the sky as well. We have spent decades wondering why no one answers, and we have imagined many reasons: that life is rare, that civilizations destroy themselves, that they are hiding, that we are early. The Watcher's theory adds one more, and it is the loneliest of them. Perhaps the sky is silent because the civilizations that endure do not stay in the sky at all. Perhaps maturity for a civilization means leaving, stepping out of the universe entirely, so that the ones still broadcasting are only the young ones, the ones who have not yet found the door. In that reading, the silence is not absence, it is graduation. And we are alone at the party not because no one else came, but because everyone who truly grew up has already left the building we are still learning to find the exits of. Notice the direction we are now travelling. In the first half of this list, the outside gained a mind and a vantage. Now, in the second half, that mind is drawing closer to us, becoming more personal, more entangled with our own existence. The Watchers see our whole story, but they are still, in the end, separate from us. They are an audience, and we are the show, and the boundary between us holds. The third theory dissolves even that. It suggests that the outside is not merely watching realities like ours, but that realities come in degrees, layered one above another, some more real than others, and that we are not the top of that stack. It suggests that above us are beings who are not just watching a fuller world but living one, and that everything we feel at full strength might be, from where they stand, a faded copy of something brighter. Keep the Watchers in mind and come with me to number 3, where the question is no longer who is outside but how real we are compared to them. Part 8. The Ancestor Reality. Ask yourself a question you have probably never had reason to ask. Is realness a simple yes or no, or could it come in degrees? We tend to assume that a thing either exists or it does not, that there is no middle setting, no such thing as being partly real or more real than something else. But the third theory on our list challenges exactly that assumption. It proposes that reality is layered, stacked in levels like floors of a building, and that some levels are more real than others, more vivid, more fundamental, more fully there. And it places us, uncomfortably, somewhere in the middle of that stack, with fuller realities above us and fainter ones below, and it suggests that the outside of our universe is simply the next floor up, a world realer than our own. The theory grows out of one of the genuine strange ideas of modern physics, put forward in 1957 by a young physicist named Hugh Everett. Everett was trying to solve a long-standing puzzle in quantum mechanics. The question of what happens when a particle that exists in many possibilities at once is measured and settles into just one. His answer was radical. He suggested that it does not settle at all. Instead, every possible outcome actually happens, but in separate branches of reality that split apart from one another, so that with every quantum event the universe divides, again and again, into countless parallel versions, each just as real as the others, each containing a version of everyone. This is the many worlds interpretation, and though it remains controversial, it is taken seriously by many physicists, because it follows from taking the mathematics of quantum theory literally, without adding anything to make the strangeness go away. But the third theory takes Everett's idea somewhere he never intended it to go. Everett's branches are all equally real. They are siblings side by side. The speculation we are considering tonight asks a different and darker question. What if the branches are not equal? What if the splitting does not just spread realities out sideways, but stacks them so that some are more fundamental than others? What if, when a reality branches, the offshoots are in some sense thinner than the reality they came from, a little less vivid, a little less real, the way a copy is always a shade fainter than the original? Follow that thought, and you get not a flat field of parallel worlds but a towering hierarchy, layer upon layer, each one descended from and slightly less real than the one above it. In this picture, our universe is not an original. It is a descendant. Somewhere above us in the hierarchy is an ancestor reality, a more fundamental version of existence from which our cosmos branched off long ago, inheriting a slightly diminished realness the way a photocopy inherits a slightly diminished sharpness. And above that ancestor is another, realer still, and above that another, the levels climbing upward towards some original reality, some first and fullest existence, the source from which the entire cascade of increasingly faint worlds has descended. The outside of our universe, in this theory, is not beside us and not around us but above us, one floor up, in a reality that would look at ours the way we might look at a dream, or a story, or a well-made imitation of the real thing. Now let the consequence settle, because it reaches into the most intimate part of your experience. If we live in a derivative reality, a copy of a copy some unknown number of levels down, then everything we feel might be a diminished version of what beings in the higher realities feel. Our joy might be a sketch of joy, our grief a faint tracing of a grief that, one level up, is felt in fuller colour and heavier weight. When you love someone, when you stand in a moment so intense that it seems like the most real thing that could possibly be, there might be a version of you one floor above, in the ancestor reality, feeling that same moment at a depth and a fullness that would make your version look, by comparison, like a pale outline. We might be living our entire inner lives at reduced resolution, and because we have never known anything else, we would have no way to notice, no fuller feeling to compare ours against, no suspicion that the volume of our own existence had been turned down. And the theory has a floor as well as a ceiling, which is where it becomes genuinely vertiginous. If reality has layers, and each layer is less real than the one above it, then below us there must be layers fainter still, realities so thin that their inhabitants barely exist at all. Their universes would be quick sketches, their histories rough drafts, their consciousness a bare flicker, a dim rumour of awareness. And from their perspective, looking up, we would be the fuller world. We would be the ancestor reality, the realer place, the gods one floor above them living in fuller colour, exactly as the beings above us are to our own eyes. We are caught in the middle of a hierarchy we can neither climb nor descend, looking up at fuller lives we can never reach and without ever seeing them, casting our own shadow downward onto thinner lives that look up at us the way we look up at whatever made us. There is a particular kind of helplessness in this that is worth naming, because it is different from the fears the earlier theories offered. In the bubbles, you were one of infinitely many copies, but each copy was fully real. In the simulation you might be switched off, but while you ran completely. Here, the wound is subtler. It is not that you might end or that you might be duplicated. It is that you might be right now at half brightness, and that this is simply your allotted place in the stack, assigned before you were born and impossible to change. Nothing you do in this life will move you up a single layer or down. You cannot earn your way into a fuller reality or fall into a thinner one. Your position in the hierarchy of realness is fixed, and the fullness of everything you will ever feel was set the moment your level branched from the one above it, and there is no appeal. Let me be clear and fair, as I've tried to be at every step, because this theory is the most speculative we have met so far, and it must be labelled honestly. The many worlds interpretation is real physics, a serious reading of quantum mechanics held by serious scientists. But the extension we have been exploring, the idea that the worlds come in degrees of realness, stacked in a hierarchy with us in the middle, is not physics at all. It is metaphysics, philosophy reaching past the edge of what can be measured. There is no experiment that could rank one reality as realer than another, no instrument that measures fullness of being. It is an idea that lives entirely in the realm of thought, and I offer it not as a claim about the world, but as a way of taking seriously the possibility that existence itself might not be the flat, uniform yes or no we always assumed. What it leaves us with is a strange new anxiety, not about whether we exist, but about how much, and about whether the answer is something we could ever even feel. It helps to understand where the raw idea of layered realness even comes from, because it is not arbitrary, and it connects to theories we have already met tonight. Think back to the nested simulations we touched on a few theories ago, worlds running inside worlds. In a stack like that, there is a natural sense in which the base reality, the original physical world at the top, is more fundamental than the simulation it runs, which is more fundamental than the simulation running inside that, and so on down. Each simulated layer depends utterly on the one above it for its existence. Pull the plug upstairs and everything below vanishes. That dependence is a kind of ranking, a direction of realness, from the fully real original down through ever more contingent copies. The ancestor reality theory takes that intuition and frees it from computers, asking whether realness itself, however it is grounded, might simply come in that kind of gradient, with us somewhere along the slope. There is an old and homely version of this that everyone already understands, and it is the relationship between an author and a character. A character in a novel is, in a sense, real. They have a name, a history, feelings the reader can share, a world they move through that has its own consistent rules. But the character is less real than the author who imagines them, and the character can never know the author, never climb up off the page into the writing room, never even suspect that the room exists. The author can know everything about the character, can feel more than the character feels, lives in a world with more dimensions of possibility. Now imagine that the author is themselves a character in a larger book, written by a still greater author who is a character in a larger book again. That is the hierarchy this theory proposes, except that it is not made of paper and ink but of realness itself, and we are somewhere in the middle pages, reading and being read, and unable to look up from either. What makes the theory land as more than an abstraction is the way it touches the one thing you cannot get outside of, which is your own experience. You know what your feelings feel like from the inside, and it seems impossible that they could be diminished versions of anything, because they are as full as anything you have ever known. But that is exactly what the theory predicts you would say. A character has no way to know they are less real than their author. From inside the story, the character's joy is the fullest joy there is, because it is the only joy they have ever had access to. If we are a layer down, we would feel complete. We would insist we were complete, and we would be wrong, and there would be no experiment, no argument, no inner effort that could ever reveal it to us, because the very faculty we would use to check is itself part of what has been turned down. That is a strange kind of prison, one whose walls are the limits of your own capacity to feel. What lingers with me about this theory is the particular way it removes hope, because it does it so gently. The earlier theories left you at least something to do. In the simulation, you might, in principle, be interesting enough to keep running. In the family tree, you were part of something ongoing. But in the hierarchy of realness, your place is simply fixed, assigned before you drew a breath, and no effort, no virtue, no achievement, no love will move you up a single layer toward the fuller worlds above or protect you from the thinner ones below. You cannot practice your way into being more real. You cannot fall out of the layer you are in. The fullness of every experience you will ever have was set the moment your reality branched from the one above it, and it is not a punishment or a reward, just a coordinate, your fixed height in a tower you did not build and cannot climb. And yet, and this is the part that keeps it from being simply bleak, you would never feel the lack because you have never known anything fuller to miss. Your half-lit world is to you the whole of the light there is. Perhaps that is a mercy. Perhaps it is the cruelest part of the trap. The theory does not tell us which, and I am not sure I could bear to know. And notice what has happened to the outside as we near the end of this list. It began as scenery, then gained a mind, then a vantage, then knowledge of our fate, and now, in this third theory, it gains fullness, a greater realness than our own. Each step has drawn the outside closer to something like a presence, something with a fuller inner life than ours. There is only one more step to take along that road, and the second theory takes it. It asks what the very top of the hierarchy might be, the realist reality, the source from which everything descends. And its answer is not a place, and not a machine, and not a civilization, but a mind. A single, immense consciousness, whose thoughts are entire universes, and inside whose dream we may be nothing more than passing characters, real only for as long as we are being imagined. Keep the hierarchy in mind, and come with me to number 2, where the outside of our universe wakes up and turns out to have been thinking us all along. Part 9. The Dreaming Mind. There is an image at the centre of some of the oldest spiritual traditions on Earth that turns out, when you look at it closely, to be one of the most unsettling answers on this entire list. In certain strands of ancient Hindu thought, the universe is described as the dream of a sleeping god. While the god dreams, the world exists, full of stars and creatures and the whole pageant of things. When the god wakes, the dream ends, and the universe with it. And when the god sleeps again and begins to dream anew, a fresh universe unfolds. For thousands of years this was treated as sacred poetry, a metaphor for the impermanence of everything. But in recent decades, a handful of philosophers and physicists, wrestling with the hardest puzzles of consciousness and reality, have begun to ask a question that would once have seemed absurd. What if it is not a metaphor? What if something like it is literally true? The theory in its modern form goes like this. Outside our universe there exists a single, immense consciousness, a mind so large and so complex that its thoughts are not small things like ours but entire realities. We are not its creations in the ordinary sense, the way a potter makes a pot and then stands separate from it. We are part of its mental activity. Every star, every galaxy, every planet, every living thing, every thought that has ever crossed your own mind is a feature of this greater mind's dreaming, the way the people and places in your dreams are features of yours. We feel real, utterly and unquestionably real, for the same reason the figures in a dream feel real to themselves while the dream is happening. The dreamer has not yet woken up, and so the dream continues to believe in itself. If that is what lies outside our universe, then the nature of the outside is not space, not machinery, not higher dimensions, but attention. And attention has a quality that makes this theory quietly terrifying once you notice it. Think about your own dreams for a moment. They are not uniformly detailed. The part of the dream you are focused on is vivid and stable, sharp with colour and specificity. But the edges, the parts you are not attending to, are vague, half-formed, shifting, contradictory. A room in a dream has no fixed number of doors until you look. A crowd has no definite faces until your attention falls on one. The dream generates detail only where the dreamer is looking, and everywhere else it remains a loose, unfinished suggestion, ready to rearrange itself the moment you turn away. Now apply that to us. If our universe is the dream of some immense mind, then the regions of reality currently held in that mind's attention are the ones that are sharp and consistent and law-abiding, and the regions it has stopped attending to might be quietly dissolving into vagueness, growing inconsistent, losing their detail without anyone inside them noticing, because the noticing would itself require the attention that has moved on. Perhaps the reason physics seems so precise, so reliable, so exquisitely consistent everywhere we look, is simply that our looking is where the dreamer is looking too, and we can never catch the universe being vague, because the act of checking is the act of drawing the dreamer's focus back. We would be forever unable to find the blurred edges of our own reality, not because they are not there, but because finding them would sharpen them. Let me take you into the experience of this, since it is the second theory and we are near the end, and this one asks to be felt rather than merely understood. Imagine that you are a figure inside an enormous dream, and that you can, just for a moment, sense the dreamer's attention resting upon you. While it rests there, everything is vivid. The room around you is sharp and complete, every object solid, every colour full, the light steady, the world firmly itself. You have never felt more real. And then, gently, without any drama, you feel the attention begin to move. It is drifting, the way a sleeper's focus drifts from one part of a dream to another, and it is drifting away from you, towards some other region, some other dream. And as it goes, at the very edges of your world, the detail begins to soften. The far corners of the room lose their certainty. The colours thin. The rules grow slightly loose. And the strangest part, the part that makes it unbearable, is that you do not notice it happening, because the you that would notice is itself made of the same softening stuff, thinning along with everything else, forgetting even to be alarmed, as the dreamer's mind wanders on towards something it finds more worth dreaming. That is the quiet catastrophe this theory holds. The dreamer has no obligation to keep dreaming us. At any moment its attention might turn fully away, to another dream, another universe, another reality it finds more interesting, and we would not feel the transition. This is that same thread returning, the one we first pulled at with the simulation, the idea that the largest facts about our existence might be things we could never feel from inside. From our perspective, nothing would happen. There would be no jolt, no fading to black, no sense of an ending. And yet the depth and the stability of everything we are would be silently draining away, replaced by the loosening residue of a dream that has lost its dreamer's regard, running on momentum, growing vaguer, while the mind that was holding us together turns its face towards something new. And beyond even that, there is the waking. However long the dream lasts, a sleeper eventually wakes, and whatever waking means for a being that exists outside our universe, this theory says that moment is coming. When it arrives, the dream ends. Not violently, not in fire or collision, but simply in the way a dream ends when you open your eyes, dissolving instantly and completely, leaving behind not ruins but nothing at all, because a dream leaves no wreckage. Our cosmos, our history, every civilization that ever rose, every person who ever lived, everything you have ever loved or feared or accomplished, would not be destroyed so much as released, let go of, no longer thought about. We would not die. We would be forgotten by the only mind that was ever holding us in being, and the forgetting would be total, because when the dream awakes, there is no longer anyone dreaming us to remember that we were ever dreamed. I owe you the plainest honesty here, because this is the most openly mystical theory on the list, and I will not pretend otherwise. This is not physics. There is no experiment that could detect a dreaming mind outside our universe, no measurement that distinguishes a dreamed cosmos from an ordinary one. It lives entirely in philosophy, in the ancient traditions that first imagined it, and in the modern philosophies of mind, sometimes called idealism, that take consciousness rather than matter to be the fundamental stuff of reality. Serious thinkers have defended versions of it, but as philosophy, as a way of reading the facts, not as a finding wrung from data. I include it because it is one of humanity's oldest and most haunting answers to our question, and because it takes the trend of this whole second half to its natural end. The outside gained a mind, then a vantage, then knowledge, then fullness, and now, at number 2, the outside is nothing but mind, a consciousness so total that we are merely a passing thought within it. I want to be clear that the modern version of this is not just repackaged mythology, because that would be too easy a way to set it aside. In philosophy, there is a serious and growing position, sometimes called idealism, and in one form cosmopsychism, which argues that consciousness, not matter, is the fundamental stuff of reality. The reasoning behind it is not mystical at all. It grows out of a genuine and stubborn problem. We have never been able to explain how physical matter, the firing of cells, the motion of particles, gives rise to inner experience, to what it actually feels like to see red or to be afraid. That gap between the physical description and the felt reality is so persistent that some serious thinkers have concluded we may have the order backwards, that experience is not produced by matter but is the ground floor, and matter is how experience appears when looked at from the outside. If something like that is true on the small scale, the argument goes, it might be true on the larger scale too, with a single encompassing consciousness as the base of everything. The dreaming God, in this dress, is not a story told to children. It is a candidate answer to the hardest question in the study of the mind. And this version sharpens the theory's most disturbing feature, which is the puzzle of why our reality is so relentlessly consistent. Physics does not merely work, it works everywhere we have ever looked, to a precision that beggars belief. the same laws on the far side of the galaxy as in this room. Why should a dreamed universe be so lawful when our own dreams are such loose, contradictory, shifting things? One answer the theory offers is chilling in its simplicity. Perhaps a mind far greater than ours dreams with a far greater discipline, holding detail steady across reaches that would collapse in a human dream. Or perhaps, and this is the darker reading, the consistency only holds where we are looking, and we are simply part of the region currently under attention, so that our every test comes back consistent, because testing is looking, and looking is what summons the detail into being. Either way, the very reliability of physics that we take as proof of a solid, mind-independent world could be, in this theory, exactly the fingerprint of a mind, holding us in focus for now. There is one more distinction I want to leave you with before we go, because it is the tender centre of this whole idea. There is a difference between the dreamer forgetting us and the dreamer waking. Forgetting is gradual. It is the attention drifting, the slow thinning we imagined a moment ago. A fading that could in principle reverse if the mind's focus ever swung back our way. Waking is final. It is not a drift, but a threshold. The whole dream releasing at once, and there is no coming back from it, because the dreamer is no longer dreaming at all. We live, in this theory, in the space between those two, sustained by an attention that might wander at any moment, and a sleep that must, someday, end. And the strangest comfort available to us is that either way, we would go quietly, with no alarm and no pain, simply ceasing to be thought, like a name you meant to remember, and then, mid-sentence, did not. And that leaves us with one theory remaining, the first on our list, and it is different in kind from all the others. Every theory tonight has offered an answer to what is outside our universe, and each answer, however strange, has been a something, or in one case a nothing, but always a definite reply. The final theory refuses to give a final reply at all. It takes the very structure of the question, the idea that there must be an outermost answer, a last layer, a foundation on which everything rests, and it asks whether that idea might itself be an illusion. It suggests that there is no top, no bottom, no floor beneath the floors, and that the search for what is ultimately outside can never end, not because we are not clever enough, but because there is no end to find. Keep the dreaming mind in your thoughts, and come with me now to number 1. Part 10. The Tower with No Floor. We have arrived at number 1, and I have to warn you that it is not like the others. Every theory tonight has handed us an answer, a something or a nothing waiting outside our universe. The final theory does something stranger and I think more permanent. It suggests that the question we have been asking all night, the question of what lies at the outermost edge of everything, does not have a final answer and cannot have one, not because we are too small to reach it, but because there is no outermost edge for an answer to live at. It suggests that reality has no floor. The seed of this idea was planted in 1931 by a mathematician named Kurt Gödel, in a result so profound that it changed the foundations of mathematics forever. Gödel was studying logical systems, the formal structures of rules and axioms from which mathematics is built, and he proved something that no one had expected and many found hard to accept. He showed that any logical system complex enough to describe ordinary arithmetic must contain statements that are true, but that cannot be proven true using only the rules of that system. There will always be truths that the system itself cannot reach. And to prove those truths, you have to step outside the system, into a larger one, with more rules, a wider framework that can see what the smaller one could not. But here is the trap that Gödel's result sets, the trap that has no exit. That larger framework, the one you stepped into to prove the truths the first system could not reach, is itself a logical system, and so it too contains truths it cannot prove. To settle those, you must step outside it in turn, into a still larger framework, which has the same problem, and so on without end. There is no final system, no ultimate framework big enough to prove all its own truths and stand complete on its own. Every level requires a level beyond it. The staircase of understanding goes up forever, and there is no top step. Now some thinkers have taken Gödel's insight and turned it from a statement about mathematics into a statement about existence itself, and this is where our final theory is born. Suppose our universe is, at bottom, a logical structure, a system of laws and consistent relationships, which is very close to how physics actually describes it. Then, by Gödel's reasoning, there are truths about our universe that cannot be established from within it. To ground those truths, to give them a foundation, something must exist outside our universe, a larger reality that contains ours as a part, the way a bigger logical system contains a smaller one. Our universe would rest upon that outer reality. But that outer reality, being itself some kind of system, would need its own foundation, a still larger reality beyond it, which would need another beyond that, forever. An infinite regress of realities, each one contained in and supported by a larger one, with no final container, no outermost reality, no last layer where the whole thing finally rests on solid ground. Let the shape of that sink in, because it is genuinely different from everything else we have considered. We have spent all night implicitly assuming that the question of what is outside has an answer, even if the answer is strange. We assumed there was a last layer, a final truth, a floor beneath all the floors. This theory says there is no floor. Reality is not a building resting on solid ground. It is a tower of infinite height and infinite depth, every level held up only by the level above it, which is held up only by the level above that, and so on with no end, and nothing, anywhere, holding up the whole. Because there is no whole. There is no complete structure to be held up. There is only the endless supporting, the infinite chain of each thing leaning on the next, all the way out, forever. I want you to fall for a moment, because this theory is best understood from the inside of the falling. Imagine that you have let go, and you are descending through the tower of realities, past level after level, each one a complete world with its own laws and its own sky, and you are looking for the bottom, for the ground floor, for the place where the tower finally rests on something solid. You fall past a universe, and below it there is another holding it up, and below that another, and you keep falling, and the floor is always one more level down, always just beneath the next, always promised and never arriving. And slowly, as you fall, something shifts in you. The falling stops feeling like an emergency, stops feeling like a plunge toward a bottom you're afraid to hit, because you begin to understand that there is no bottom to hit, that the falling is not the interruption of some stable state, but is itself the only state there is. The falling was never going to end in a floor. The falling is the floor. The endless descent, the infinite leaning of each reality on the next, is not a crisis in the structure of things. It is the structure of things. There was never anything else underneath, and this is where the theory delivers its final blow to something we have wanted all night without quite admitting it. We have wanted an ultimate explanation. We have wanted to know at the very end why there is a universe at all, why any of this exists rather than nothing. This theory tells us we will never have that explanation, and not because it is hidden, but because it is not there to be found. Every time we ask why our universe exists, the answer lies in the larger reality that contains it. And when we ask why that reality exists, the answer lies in the one containing it. The explanation is always one level further out, always just beyond the last place we managed to reach, receding exactly as fast as we climb toward it. There is no final because. Every question about the foundation of existence pushes its own answer one layer outward, forever, and the truth we're reaching for is always, by the very structure of things, one step beyond our grasp. Sit with the loneliness of that, because it is the last and quietest fear on this whole list, and it is the one I think stays longest. If reality has no foundation, then there is no original reality, no first cause, no prime mover, nothing anywhere that simply is, on its own terms, for its own sake. Everything that exists only because something larger exists to hold it up. Every universe is borrowed from a greater one. Every layer is on loan from the layer beyond it. You are real, but only because the world that contains you is real, and that world is real only because the one containing it is real, and that recursion never, ever reaches a thing that is real, all by itself, needing nothing beneath it. We are infinitely far down in a stack of borrowed existences, held up by a chain of dependencies with no first link, and the loan can never be repaid, because there is no original lender, no ground, no one who owns the realness outright and lends it down the line. There is only the borrowing, all the way out, forever. There is an old joke that turns out to be the most bottomless thing on this list, with no floor under it. A scientist explains that the Earth orbits the Sun, and an old woman objects that the Earth actually rests on the back of an enormous turtle. And what does the turtle stand on, the scientist asks, thinking he has her. Another turtle, she says. And that one? She smiles. You're very clever, young man, but it is turtles all the way down. We tell that story to laugh at her, because an infinite stack of turtles seems obviously absurd. Something has to hold up the bottom. But the final theory tonight asks, with complete seriousness, what if she was right? What if there is no bottom turtle, no ground, no final thing that holds up all the rest, and the stack really does go down forever? We assume the joke was on her. The joke may be on us. And here is the exact shape of the despair and the wonder in that, because they are the same shape. We usually imagine that we fail to understand the universe because the answer is hidden, locked away somewhere we cannot reach, waiting to be found by someone cleverer or better equipped. That is a hopeful kind of ignorance. It means there is a truth out there, and the search could in principle end. But this theory proposes a different and stranger kind of not knowing. It says the final explanation is not hidden. It is absent. There is no locked room with the answer inside because every room opens onto a larger room forever, and the question why is there anything at all does not have an answer, waiting somewhere out past our reach. It has no answer anywhere, because an answer would be a final layer, and there is no final layer. The search does not fail, it simply never terminates, and the reason it never terminates is not our weakness, but the structure of everything. And so we come back, at the very end, to the question we started with, the small childhood question that the adults could not answer. What is outside the universe? We have walked through 10 answers tonight, and look at what they were. More universes, an endless foam of them. A family of parent cosmoses, birthing one another through black holes. Membranes drifting a breath away in a direction we cannot point to. A room of machines, dreaming us as programs. Higher dimensions with beings who see us completely and whom we can never see. An ocean of true nothing that unmakes whatever touches it. Watchers beyond time who already know how we end. A hierarchy of realness in which we are a faded copy. A sleeping mind whose dream we are and who will one day wake. And finally a tower with no floor in which the question itself has no bottom. 10 answers, and not one of them can be reached, or tested, or confirmed. The question that seems so simple returns the strangest kind of reply, which is that it may have no final reply at all, and that the honest mind, hearing this, does not close its hand around any single answer, but holds all 10 of them, loosely, in the dark. Notice that every one of these theories followed to its end did the same quiet thing. It began by promising a place outside, a somewhere you could imagine standing, and then it dissolved that place into something you could never stand in at all. More space you can never cross, a dimension you cannot face toward, a machine that is not in our space, a mind, nothing, an endless regress with no last room. The further we looked for the outside, the less it resembled a country beyond a wall, and the more it became a change in what the word outside could even mean. And perhaps that is the truest thing we can say tonight. Perhaps the question of what is outside the universe is not a question with a missing answer, but a question that gently takes itself apart the moment you hold it up to the light. The way north stops meaning anything once you're standing exactly at the North Pole, with every direction pointing south. So here is where I will leave you, as the night settles and your thoughts begin to slow. You're inside something whose outside you can picture in 10 different ways, and confirm in none. You will carry that not knowing with you, quietly, every time you look up at the sky. And I do not think that is a reason for fear, though fear was easy to find on the way down this list. I think it is a reason for a certain calm. The largest question a human being can ask does not have a small, tidy answer waiting to be found and finished. It has a whole open sky of possible answers, none of them closed, none of them proven, all of them still alive. The mystery is not a wall that shuts you out. It is a room with no ceiling, and you are lying in it right now, looking up, and the fact that you cannot see the top is not the end of anything. It is the reason there is still, always, something more to wonder about. Rest easy. The question will keep. It has waited longer than there have been minds to ask it, and it will still be there, patient and open and unanswered, long after you have closed your eyes.